The Five Nights at Freddy's franchise is one that I've been a fan of ever since the very first game. If you have ever watched a video on my channel before, I think I've done a good job making that fact pretty obvious due to me always including some sort of reference to the franchise in basically every video. But for the longest time, I haven't actually made a video on the franchise itself. The closest I got was a Smash Ultimate Spirit video, but that was still Smash Bros. I want to finally do a full video on the FNAF franchise. The reason I haven't up until this point and mostly just stuck with Mario and Minecraft is because FNAF fans are scary. I mean, you could say something totally innocent like you don't like El Chip and remember me. But with the release of the second FNAF movie, I thought now was as good a time as ever to finally make a fully dedicated video to the franchise. And where else would be a better place to start than the animatronics themselves? Every game has a brand new selection of animatronics to scare people and make new merchandise out of. But with so many animatronics, some are bound to be worse than others, so today I'm going to rank every Five Nights at Freddy's animatronic from the worst to the best. Now obviously this is an incredibly subjective video. While my opinion may be the most correct, I do recognize the El Chip fans still want me dead. Now a list like this is very hard to judge because there are so many factors that can go into liking a character. Their design, voice, jump scares, role in the story, gameplay, or heck even if they're in a funny meme can all affect how I view an animatronic. So I'm just going to be considering all of that for the ranking criteria. Another difficult thing is actually figuring out what I'm ranking. For the sake of this list, I'm including every animatronic I can think of from the mainline games. Spin-offs like FNAF World and Into the Pit won't be counted. At least 10 FNAF fans just had a heart attack because I called those spin-offs. The books are also not relevant to this list because I don't feel like reading. So the list of games that will be considered are on screen now. Any animatronic from those games are going to be in the ranking. Different variations of the same character will be counted separately since most of the time I do have different opinions about them. So for example, both Freddy Fazbear and Withered Freddy will take up separate spots. There are a couple exceptions I decided to make, but we'll get to those when we get there. Speaking of exceptions, since this is an animatronic ranking, I decided not to include Phone Guy, Old Man Consequences, and Vanny despite them being an Ultimate Custom Night or Security Breach. They just didn't feel right on a list like this. Maybe if you ask for my opinion, I'll leave a reply or something. I also didn't include Gregory because I have no clue what that kid is. That does also bring me to my final warning before the list. I have a much stronger connection to most of the characters pre-Security Breach. I'm not one of those that think FNAF needed to end after Ultimate Custom Night, but I have way more nostalgia for the old guys and their story is mostly complete. I have also personally found that the current story is much harder to follow in general, so I'm sure I'm going to make plenty of lore mistakes or things that people think are mistakes. That goes for characters in the classic games as well, so I apologize if my recollection does not line up with yours. With all that said, we have a total of 87 animatronics to rank today. Since there's not really a concrete list of characters, there is a decent chance I missed one, so if I did, I'll have a pinned comment talking about that character, so make sure to check that out before commenting. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right in. Just for a bit of extra fun, I'm going to be throwing all of these guys into a tier list. So to start us off, we have our smallest tier being the F tier, the guys that I genuinely despise. We only have 2-ish characters here, so the FNAF series is pretty consistent in terms of making characters that I can appreciate. The character design in the series is probably its best aspect as there are so many recognizable characters among the cast. But there is one that everyone agrees is awful. 87 Scrap Trap. This is the variation of Springtrap seen in Pizzeria Simulator, and it's just so much uglier than the original version. I get that the idea is that he's supposed to be even more worn down, but he just looks like a loser. The original Springtrap is one of the best designs in the series, so hitting it with such a massive downgrade has left a horrible taste in most fans' mouths. Obviously, massive spoiler, the main antagonist of the franchise, William Afton, is inside of Scrap Trap, which does make him very important for the story. But honestly, I'm just gonna give all of the story credit to Springtrap, who we'll see a lot later in the list. Whenever I think of Scrap Trap, I think of his stupid design, his stupid jump scare, and stupid UCN mechanic where he just tries to kill you once and then gives up. I think I would have easily preferred if we just got normal Springtrap and Pizzeria Simulator, or at least a design that was much closer to the original. As of now, Scrap Trap just looks incredibly ugly, and I have nothing positive to say about this rendition of the character. 86, the Biddy Bab and Electro Biddy Babs. Okay, this one is a lot less serious, I just hate looking at these things. They're a bit too human, but not in an uncanny valley way, just in an ugly baby way. I will gladly never think of these weirdos again. But okay, we're out of the tiers of guys that I absolutely despise, and now we're on to the D tier. This is a much bigger tier, but I still imagine it'll go by pretty quickly since most of the animatronics are here because I literally have no strong feelings about them at all. 85, Endo-01. This guy's literally just an Easter egg in the first game that can appear backstage. I think the future Endo Easter eggs are much more interesting, so Endo-01 just kind of ends up being forgettable for me. 84, Bonnet. This is like Bon Bon, but pink! Bonnet is found in both sister locations Custom Night and Ultimate Custom Night, and in both games she'll just run across the screen. Booping her on the nose is kind of a fun mechanic, but to be honest, I just think a simple recolor of Bon Bon is a little lame. 83, Nightmare Mangle. I can see this one being kind of controversial, so hear me out. Mangle himself, that's the GOAT. But that's mostly because her design is so broken and messed up. It's a really great concept, but unfortunately, I don't think it translates that well into the Nightmare setting. I think most of the Nightmare designs are pretty cool spins on their original versions as they try to make them appear more over the top scary. But Mangle is already pretty scary by itself, so the Nightmare design just ends up looking like one of those realistic Minecraft texture packs. This design doesn't do anything better than the original in my opinion, so I think it's certainly the worst Nightmare. 82, Staff Bots. This entry just incorporates all of the different staff bots from throughout Security Breach, Ruin, and so on. They're just sort of basic NPC animatronics, none of which are really that memorable to me. I kinda like the damage staff bots, but that's because they look like Nightmarion, who we'll see much later in the list. 81, Carney. He comes from Help Wanted 2 and talks during some of the minigames. He's our lowest Freddy rendition, if you even want to call him that, and that's mostly because I find him pretty forgettable. His design is fine, but I honestly don't think there was any reason for him to look like Freddy, like he could have been any animal. Guess every game needs its own funny bear. The main thing I remember Carney for is the fact that one of its voice lines is used as evidence that the player in Help Wanted 2 is actually Cassie's father.
Now, you look like you got kids. Win a prize for the little one.
This was certainly a good hint, but I don't think it was necessary to come to the right conclusion, so Carney still ends up being kind of forgettable. Now this next segment, I'm going to be grouping 5 animatronics together because they all give me the exact same feeling of not being able to care. That group is the Phantom animatronics from FNAF 3. This has always been my least favorite overall set in the series because they're all basically just the original animatronics, but puke green. They're also not really characters because they're all just supposed to be spooky ghosts. As for the order of this 5, we first have 80, Phantom Chica. She only appears in FNAF 3 and has a lamer jump scare than the other FNAF 3 exclusive. 79, Phantom Foxy. I generally like Foxy more than Chica, but Phantom Foxy is only in FNAF 3, so that holds him back. 78, Phantom Balloon Boy. He's in both FNAF 3 and Ultimate Custom Night, so that gave him a little boost. 77, Phantom Freddy. Same with this guy, but Freddy Fazbear is way more awesome than Balloon Boy. 76, Phantom Mangle. Of this set of Phantoms, Mangle is definitely my favorite because it is a little funny the way they slide onto the screen in Ultimate Custom Night when they make their noise. Plus, being loud and obnoxious noise-wise fits with Mangle's portrayal in FNAF 2. But yeah, overall, not much to really say about the Phantoms since they're just worse versions of their original counterparts. There is, however, one Phantom that I didn't include here for reasons we'll see much later in the list. 75, Glamrock Bonnie. This guy's low on the list for one simple reason. Glamrock Bonnie is dead! We don't really get to see him in action at all, the most we get is his corpse in Ruin. I was honestly debating whether or not to include him at all, but he's definitely more important than Endo-01, so why not? The mystery surrounding his death is an important part of the narrative, but as far as I know, we don't really have any concrete answer to say exactly what happened and why. So because of the lack to really go off of for the character, he kinda has to place low. 74, Burn Trap. Compared to Scrap Trap's terrible design, Burn Trap is a whole lot better. Still not quite Spring Trap good, but a passable design. The reason he's in D tier is because his existence makes no sense. From what I've heard, he was just supposed to be an Easter egg in Security Breach, but due to miscommunication, he somehow turned into a massive boss fight. It's not even clear if this guy is real or if Gregory just made him up. All I know is that if this is actually still William, I would be pretty disappointed because FNAF Ultimate Custom Night really did a good job wrapping up his story. If Burn Trap is meant to be the mimic though, I think that's pretty cool. So my opinion on this guy really just depends on how the story goes from here. 73, Plush Trap. And here we got ourselves another questionably existing version of Spring Trap. He really needs to get real. Plush Trap comes from FNAF 4, and is clearly just a leftover from when the game was supposed to show that the entire FNAF series was a dream. Luckily, Scott moved away from that idea because "it was all just a dream" is terrible writing. That unfortunately leaves Plush Trap's existence in the game a bit questionable since the player has no real reason to see any Springtrap-like character in their sleep. In fact, I believe Plush Trap has been entirely retconned through the introduction of Nightmare Balloon Boy. When asked about the canonicity of FNAF 4's Halloween update, Scott specifically said that Nightmare Balloon Boy is canon, which to me implies that he replaced Plush Trap. Gameplay-wise, they both appear in the exact same Between Night minigame where the player has to try to stop them before getting jump scared. If successful, the player will be able to skip ahead a little bit in the next night. I do like the minigame and think the idea behind it is quite fun, but since Nightmare Balloon Boy also has it, I think I'm comfortable putting Plush Trap low. 72, The Blob. I just have no clue what to make of this thing. It's a weird amalgamation of several animatronics from the first few games, which is weird since those spirits have all been laid to rest by the time of Security Breach. I don't think the Blob is actually the spirits of the original dead kids, but I also don't really know what it is at all or how it plays into the major story. The design is kinda cool, even if a lot of it doesn't really make a ton of sense. I'm sure the Blob will get expanded on in future games, but right now I just have to keep it kinda low. I'm not calling it the Tangle. 71, Mixes. I similarly just haven't found myself caring much for Mixes yet. Their role in the story though has been much more defined, having a strong presence in Ruin, along with a slight explanation for what Mixes is in Secret of the Mimic. For me though, they just haven't really stood out much in this modern era of games, despite me knowing that they're quite important. I don't really know how to explain it other than I just don't vibe with it yet, but maybe my opinions will improve with future games. 70, JJ. Here we have our first character originating from my favorite FNAF game, FNAF 2. For the most part, I think the character designs in this game are excellent, but seeing as JJ is just an Easter egg, it kinda makes sense for them to be a bit low. In FNAF 2, she would have a 1 in 1,000 chance of appearing under the desk in the office, where she would just stare. While that is neat, FNAF 2 is full of much more interesting Easter egg characters, to the point where JJ was kind of thrown to the side and forgotten. I remember not even being sure if she was real until JJ was revealed for Ultimate Custom Night. In that game, she does play a bit more of a role as she'll be able to disable your doors, but at the end of the day, she is just a Balloon Boy recolor. The reason she's higher than anything we've talked about so far is just because I think the idea of her full name being Jaloon Jurl is kinda funny. 69, Rockstar Chica. Design-wise, the Rockstar family has never really been my favorite, as they're far from the most iconic designs in the main 4 animatronics. To be fair, that's definitely by design, since they're not supposed to be the main focus of their original game, Pizzeria Simulator. In fact, if it was just left to that game, all of the Rockstars would be quite low. Luckily, I think many of them became much more iconic through Ultimate Custom Night, but I can't really say that applies to Rockstar Chica. It's kinda funny that you have to defend against her using a wet floor sign, but that's really all she has going for her. And her awesome maracas, I guess. But now it's time we move up to our C tier. Still not my favorite animatronics in the series, but I think they are at least a little more memorable. 68, El Chip. Yeah, sorry guys, I just don't find him that interesting. It's cute that he's supposed to be a reference to Mr. Chipper, which if you didn't know, is from one of Scott's games before FNAF. It was criticized because its characters look like creepy animatronics, so Scott took that criticism and made the FNAF franchise we have today. I can only wonder if the person who made that criticism regrets dooming us to a world with Freddy Fazbear. Oh yeah, anyway, El Chip, more like El Chump. His only purpose is to serve ads in Ultimate Custom Night, which is cute, but doesn't really make him an interesting character. 67, Rockstar Bonnie. Like the other Rockstars, his design isn't necessarily my favorite, but I do like his voice in Ultimate Custom Night.
What a treat to come here and meet your face as it hits concrete.
It's very unique from any of the others in the series, so that carried him up a decent amount in the list. His mechanic of requiring the player to look for his guitar in the cameras is pretty unique too. 66, Ned Bear. He's the first of the mediocre melodies on the list, who are literally meant to be sort of bootleg characters. Like the Rockstars I mentioned before, they were just sort of filler characters in Pizzeria Simulator that got more of a chance to shine in Ultimate Custom Night. Ned Bear I definitely think is the lamest of the group since he's just a bear. We have a lot of those. Gameplay wise, all of the mediocre melodies are basically the same, as they're all just hiding in the duct, so their main distinguishing factor outside of their designs are their voice lines. Even though Ned Bear is my least favorite, I do think he gets some pretty funny lines after he jump scares you.
Don't you hate getting killed by obscure secondary characters?
I also really like how some of the mediocre melodies are used as puppets for the vengeful spirit, who will talk through them occasionally with dialogue that sounds way different from their normal comedic stuff.
This is how it feels, and you get to experience it over and over and over again. Forever. I will never let you leave.
So even though Ned Bear is my least favorite, I still think he works quite well. 65, Orville. Very similar reasoning for why Ned Bear is low. He's the leader of the mediocre melodies, so he does have that going for him, but he's not as funny as the other three we haven't seen yet. The reason I put him above Ned Bear is because his voice is a bit more unique, having a more old man sort of vibe. I think that in turn makes him have my favorite vengeful spirit line of the bunch.
He tried to release you. He tried to release us. But I'm not gonna let that happen. I will hold you here. I will keep you here. No matter how many times they burn us.
But the main reason I have him above Ned Bear is, well, to address the elephant in the room. He's orange. 64, Withered Freddy. The Withered set of animatronics from FNAF 2 are probably my favorite overall set in the series, so we're gonna have to wait a while until we see any of the others. I think in general, they did a fantastic job making the Withereds feel distinct from their original designs in really unique ways. Unfortunately, I can't really say the same for Withered Freddy. He's by far the least changed to the Withereds, which is understandable since he's the main character, but it makes this version of Freddy not really have much by itself. I do like how this design looks, but I don't ever think about it by itself, unlike the other 3 Withered animatronics. He's pretty much just a worse Freddy Fazbear for me. Again, not a bad design like Scrap Trap was, it just doesn't have too much on its own. He does look funny when he's standing in the hallway though. 63, Dee Dee and Zor. Yes, I said no FNAF world, but Daloon Durl does play a big part. But Dee Dee does play a big part in Ultimate Custom Night by being incredibly annoying. You could just be minding your own business until suddenly,
Uh-oh, how unfortunate.
Honestly though, I kinda like how she spices up the gameplay a bit, and her little jingle isn't that annoying. What I think gives her extra points is the fact that there are 6 Dee Dee exclusive characters that can't normally be selected in the main menu. Those are Shadow Bonnie, Plush Trap, Nightmare Chica, Bonnet, the Mini Renas, and Lolbit. I just think it's cool how she adds in more characters, though besides gameplay, Dee Dee as a character isn't that interesting. Oh yeah, Zor is also just Dee Dee, but if she was a creepypasta, and then hyper-realistic blood filled the screen. Zor will always spawn on 50/20 mode to summon her entire roster, and can appear rarely during normal gameplay too. I honestly just combined Dee Dee and Zor in my head as the same character, which is why they're taking up the same spot on the list. 62, Music Man. Absolutely freakish design that I'm happy keeps coming back. He's another Pizzeria Simulator character that really got his gameplay start in Ultimate Custom Night, and I like how his symbols crash together as he approaches. He's right behind me. It's perfectly ominous and unique for this character. I definitely think they improved on Music Man in future games though, so I don't really think about the original too much. 61, Funtime Chica, and 60, Glamrock Chica. I've just always gotten similar vibes from these two, so I think ranking them together is fair. Funtime Chica comes from Pizzeria Simulator, but only really got a use in Ultimate Custom Night where she would act as a distraction. It's not a very interactive gimmick, but it works fine enough. The only other real thing of note about her is that I think it's funny that Chica was just gone during Sister Location. There are some theories that she's the Springlock suit we're in during Night 4, but sadly, I don't think that's the case. I believe her absence was how we first found out about Chica's party world though, so there is some world building here. As for Glamrock Chica, she's definitely the least important of the main 4 in Security Breach. She's just kind of there as the first main enemy, but she does that job pretty well. And as a reward, she gets crushed. Speaking of which, all of the Glamrock animatronics are going to be combined with their ruined and shattered counterparts. Unlike the Withereds, it didn't really feel right to separate them out since I don't think I've ever thought of the ruined versions as different. Also for both of these Chicas, I definitely prefer the yellow color scheme for her, but I appreciate them mixing it up with white for both of these games. 59, Glamrock Endoskeletons. Now this is kind of similar to the staff bots we saw earlier in the list where they aren't really a specific character, but rather a group of enemies. Honestly though, I thought their gameplay mechanics were really cool, so that brought these guys up much higher. Essentially, they work like a Minecraft creaking, where they will chase you and freeze whenever you're looking at them. Actually, this is based on the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who and not Minecraft. This is always a pretty scary mechanic in anything that it's in, so I think it fits great in the setting of FNAF. The Endoskeletons don't really have a character of their own though, which is what's holding them back. 58, Mini Music Men. Similar to our last entry, this is another group of animatronics that don't really have their own character, but are fun from a gameplay perspective. In Security Breach, they'll chase Gregory down the vents, and while it is simple, it's definitely effective in feeling tense. Plus it sort of acts like a smaller version of the DJ Music Man boss fight. What I think puts the Mini Music Men above the Glamrock Endos is the fact that they appear in Ruin with a different mechanic, where you have to try and lure them away from the places you need to go. So again, even if they aren't really great characters on their own, I do quite like their gameplay. 57, Happy Frog. Mediocre Melody number 3. I like her more than the other two we've seen so far because, well, she's just so joyous and whimsical. Her voice lines are a lot more peppy than the other two, which I think is kind of fun.
Everyone underestimates me, but then they turn their back and I'm like, boo, and they're like, what?
Plus, of the mediocre animals, I think a frog is probably my favorite. 56, Trash in the Gang. This is another group of animatronics that comes from Pizzeria. I just think the concept of Trash in the Gang is funny, and their usage in Ultimate Custom Night is pretty solid, acting as a distraction by jump scaring you randomly in the night. I especially love the noise it uses. 55, Sun, Moon, and Eclipse. This is how you guys are gonna find me after this video. Now, as far as I can tell, these guys are pretty popular in the FNAF community, but I personally never got it. I like that they have distinct designs, but in my opinion, their design is kinda ugly too. Their personalities work well together, with both being insane, but in different ways. They are certainly a memorable animatronic from the Security Breach era, but I just haven't found myself really connecting with them. If Secret of the Mimic is anything to go by also, it seems like they're gonna be pretty important to the story. I don't really know how they fit in just yet though, so they're remaining lowish on my list for now. 54, Endo 02. We saw Endo 01 much earlier in the list, but I think Endo 02's Easter egg is way cooler. Rarely in FNAF 2, he can appear in either the prize corner camera or in the vent. While he can't kill the player, it sure does look like it's trying to make its way towards you. It's such a mysterious Easter egg because we still have no clue whose endoskeleton this is even supposed to be. I think having an unexplainable character like this is just kinda cool and adds to the creepiness factor of FNAF 2. Besides these two screenshots though, there's literally nothing else to go off of, so I can't really bring them up much higher. 53, Hand Unit. I was debating whether or not to include this guy on the list, but I was at 86 entries and really wanted to hit that perfect 87 so he got to sneak in. He's found in Sister Location, where he'll talk to Michael Afton throughout the different nights. Oh, sorry, I mean
Eggs Benedict.
I've just always been a fan of Hand Unit's voice, and I'm happy that it keeps recurring throughout the series as the corporate voice of Fazbear.
It's a fine line to walk, but you did it, completing your job with such an efficient level of laziness that we're surprised you're able to dress yourself in the morning.
Every line out of this guy's mouth is pretty perfectly delivered. I definitely prefer his normal voice over the teenager voice, but that adds some nice variety too. Plus, Hand Unit is also responsible for
Exotic Butters.
The main reasons for Hand Unit being lower on the list is because he's not really involved with the gameplay itself, and it's hard for me to count the voice appearing in other games as being the same character. I'm trying to only look at Sister Location here, so even if I think his voice lines in Pizzeria Simulator are funnier, I don't know if I can really count that for Hand Unit. I think he would be a bit higher if I did count that, but for now, I think this spot is fair.
Now get out.
52, Nightmare. This one I personally had a pretty difficult time placing on the list. He's the final boss of FNAF 4, what many see as the representation of death as the crying child finally dies. Well, at least until FNAF 4 became about Michael Afton being stuck in a gas chamber so he can be experimented on by William Afton, but let's not worry about that. On nights 7 and 8, Nightmare will replace all of the animatronics past 4 AM, very similar to Nightmare Fredbear in earlier nights. In fact, Nightmare is just a recolor of Nightmare Fredbear. While that does make his design a bit less special, I like that it's actually not black, but instead a transparent version of the design. If you look closely, you can even see things like Nightmare's brain through his translucent skin. I think this adds to his ghostly vibe compared to the other FNAF 4 Nightmares. He's also one of the few special characters in the franchise to get a jump scare still that crashes the game rather than a traditional animation. I think that also does a fantastic job of making this guy feel even more eerie. So with all of this praise, why is he still so low? Well, that's because I think he was literally just replaced by a different character that does everything he does but better. We will get to them much later in the list, but they have completely stolen Nightmare's spotlight in my eyes, to the point where I wish they were the one in FNAF 4 instead of Nightmare. Pretty much every game in the franchise since FNAF 4 has replaced Nightmare's death symbolism with this other character, so I think that leaves the original feeling a bit less interesting. I wouldn't blame anyone for putting Nightmare higher up on the list, I just think he's been totally replaced for me. 51, Bon Bon. I think this spin on Bonnie was really cute for Sister Location. Instead of giving him his own animatronic, he's now tied to Funtime Freddy as a hand puppet. While I do really like that mix up on the idea, Funtime Freddy is definitely the one that benefits from this the most. I always just see Bon Bon as a part of Funtime Freddy, rather than Funtime Freddy being a part of Bon Bon. I really like Funtime Freddy, so we'll see him much later, but I think Bon Bon by itself isn't too horribly special. 50, Nightmare Balloon Boy. And here we have the plush trap replacement we talked about a while back. He was introduced in the FNAF 4 Halloween DLC, and as I said, Scott considers him specifically to be canon. I think his design looks really funny, and I like how much sleeker it is compared to the other Nightmares. His massive jaw is definitely the best part. It's both goofy and scary, just like it should be. But outside of the design, the best part of the character has to be his voice.
There just isn't room in here for both of us.
He's got a mischievous evil gremlin vibe, which I think fits the design perfectly. We already talked about his FNAF 4 gameplay and plush trap segment, but I also like how he works in Ultimate Custom Night, where you have to make sure you flash him when he's standing. It can be a little annoying if you have to flash a light in your office while he's laying down, but I think the mechanic was still a good idea and fits with the original minigame quite well. 49 Jacko Bonnie and 48 Jacko Chica.
The jack-o'-lantern.
I would say these two are the faces of the Halloween update for FNAF 4, obviously fitting quite well due to their jack-o'-lantern theming. Now Spoilers for the rest of the list, I'm not including most holiday or weird versions of animatronics that came in DLC packs, since I think most people agree that they aren't true animatronics for the franchise. Sorry, Liberty Chica community. I made an exception for these two though, because the Halloween update for FNAF 4 introduced plenty of reoccurring characters. As for these two, they literally work exactly the same as Nightmare Bonnie and Nightmare Chica. I think the idea of a jack-o'-lantern variant is pretty funny though, so that helped them quite a bit on the list. Of the two, Jacko Chica is definitely the best because of the fact that she got to appear in Ultimate Custom Night while Jacko Bonnie didn't. She'll spawn in the office if it gets too hot, and I think she has a really funny voice line where she just goes,
Did things get really hot here, or is it just me?
Plus, I also like how the cupcake has been replaced by an actual jack-o'-lantern, which you can even get jump scared by in FNAF 4. So I think they did a great job on these two, but Jacko Chica is definitely better. 47, the Paper Pals. And to end off our C tier, we have another Easter egg character from FNAF 2. Unlike the others that are mostly meant to be creepy, these guys are actually kind of funny. There's plates for Freddy, Bonnie, and some random guy. During night 7 though, there is a 1 in 100 chance for the human Paper Pal to gain AI and move into the office, where it'll just sit there and watch the player. I find this Easter egg very funny because there's just no explanation for it. Is the Paper Pal possessed? Did one of the other animatronics get a little silly and decide to move it in there? We'll never know. All I do know is that I think the Easter egg is funny, so it belongs here on the list. Plus, there was also a theory going around that the humanoid Paper Pal was actually meant to be the Mimic all along, and if that's true, absolute cinema. But now it's time we move on up to our biggest tier, the B tier. I was already starting to like a lot of the characters in the upper end of C tier, but we're definitely now with the characters I like to see. 46, the Mini-Renas. Now this one I feel may be a bit surprising to see this high up on the list. After all, it's another group of animatronics rather than a single character. In fact, it's the last set we'll see in this video. So why do I like the Mini-Renas more than the Glamrock Endos, Mini Music Men, and Biddy Babs? Well, I just think the Mini-Renas have a really good design and it fits their gameplay extremely well. I don't know what it is exactly, but I think it's their tiny, lanky bodies mixed with the blank face that gives me the creeps. The fact that they often come in hordes makes them even more unnerving during any of their gameplay segments. Their most iconic moment would have to be Sister Location's 4th night, where you have to try and survive in a springlock suit while the Mini-Renas climb all around you. This is probably my favorite night of the game due to just how claustrophobic it feels, and the horde of tiny Mini-Renas helps a ton with that. Though I can understand why some would hate this night, seeing as it used to be so hard that it actually had to get patched. Even outside of this night, I also find the Mini-Renas blocking the screen in both Sister Location's Custom Night and Ultimate Custom Night kind of funny. So even though this isn't one standalone character, I think the Mini-Renas do the concept of a smaller animatronic horde extremely well. 45, Molten Freddy, and 44, Ennard. Okay, you know how I said the Mini-Renas were the last entry containing multiple characters? That technically wasn't true, as both Molten Freddy and Ennard are supposed to be the combined bodies and spirits of the Sister Location animatronics, with Baby not being included in Molten Freddy. Obviously, they are both important characters, being one of the 4 animatronics in Pizzeria Simulator and the main boss of Sister Location's Secret Night. I just kind of find it hard to attach myself to these two specifically when they are just amalgamations of different characters we'll see later. As for each of them specifically, Molten Freddy's place in the story has always been kind of confusing. The other 3 Pizzeria Simulator animatronics are massively important characters, but Molten Freddy just feels like the other guys from Sister Location. There is the theory that Molten Freddy is possessed by the spirits of the MCI victims, which I think fits the game bringing everyone together extremely well, but I just feel like that wasn't explained the best. I know this is FNAF, so asking for an explanation is a lot, but I find it hard to connect Molten Freddy to the MCI in my head, so he always feels like a bit of an outlier, even if I do think Molten MCI is probably what Scott was going for. I am at least happy with Molten Freddy's voice being the same as Funtime Freddy though.
One big happy family.
As for Ennard, I like him a bit more because of that secret night for the good ending in Sister Location. Plus, him being a culmination of the animatronics plan to use Michael Afton as a skin suit is pretty cool, and it led to the best cutscene in the franchise.
Look, the next day, right? The next day he looks a little green.
But that's just the thing. Ennard feels more like a plan than a character. I like the concept, but I definitely like the characters that make him up a whole lot more. Also, Ennard's jump scare is garbage. 43, Rockstar Freddy. He is being hard carried by his role in Ultimate Custom Night, more specifically his voice lines. He will stand in your office every so often and will ask,
"Please deposit 5 coins."
If you don't deposit 5 Faz coins, he'll keep asking over and over, which gets funny as you can hear his patience start to run thin as he keeps asking.
"Please deposit 5 coins. Please deposit, please deposit, please deposit."
Please deposit 5 coins.
That line by itself is already pretty memorable, but what I think pushes him into B tier is the fact that you can use the heater to confuse him and break his voice even further.
You are attempting to trick Freddy! You are attempting to...
Freddy doesn't like this.
So all around, his great and memorable quotes were able to carry him pretty far. But if that still isn't enough to convince you, Rockstar Freddy is the star of this emotional real-life rescue that was on the news.
And they pulled out all the stops to pull the teddy off the roof. So they didn't need to raise the roof to save the stranded teddy. You betty that they're ready when there's a bare need for Freddy.
42, Toy Freddy. Here's another variant of Freddy that I just find kind of funny. That's because he's, well...
You know, he's kinda, fat.
That video clip is one of my favorite things to come from the FNAF community, so that helped Toy Freddy out a lot. Honestly, if he just had his FNAF 2 appearance, he would be a lot lower. However, his gimmick of being a gamer and Ultimate Custom Night is really funny. It is very annoying to keep track of, but funny nonetheless. But that also comes with some jump scare lines that I like quite a lot.
That game was totally rigged. If I get jump scared, you get jump scared.
And to add even more to his outside content, I think the video of him side-eyeing Toy Bonnie's death is also very funny. So he went from a character that I didn't really care about in FNAF 2 due to just looking like a stupider and lamer Freddy, into one that I find very funny due to future games and outside content. 41, Glitch Trap. This is another one that I was a bit unsure of if I wanted to include, but since I didn't include him in my animatronic spirit video for Smash and got a bunch of comments asking about him, I figured why not include him here. He appears as the main antagonist in Help Wanted and has continued to make appearances ever since. He's obviously meant to have some sort of connection to William Afton, but that exact connection is still not fully clear to this day. If Glitch Trap was somehow William Afton's actual spirit possessing Help Wanted, then I would think that's pretty dumb and stupid. Luckily though, I think Glitch Trap is more so meant to be connected to the Mimic. If that's the case, then I think that's way cooler to have a main antagonist about mimicking things mimic the previous main antagonist. Since I believe the Mimic connection is what they're going for, I like Glitch Trap a decent amount. I also like that his design is a weird costume rather than the actual spring Bonnie suit, so it sort of comes off as an uncanny valley sort of resemblance to the original. 40, Chica. And here we have finally reached the first of the main 4 animatronics. It's funny because she also died first. I think overall, the first 4 animatronics are incredibly designed. They have that perfect balance of looking like actual animatronic mascots that kids would enjoy, while still being quite creepy under the right conditions. It honestly feels a bit mean putting Chica this low down, but as a character, I think there are just much better versions of her later. The original design doesn't really have much for me, besides of course the legacy of being the first rendition. As for more specific things I can give her credit for, I think the way she stares at you through the window is pretty funny.
Hi, how are you?
I also like that she carries the cupcake, which I didn't count as a separate animatronic for this list, but I think they're cool too. Overall, this is just a pretty strong starting point for Chica as a character. 39, Toy Chica. Despite the community being weird, I do still like Toy Chica slightly more than the original for 2 reasons. For one, I really like that she's able to remove both her eyes and her beak. It gives her a very unique trait compared to the other animatronics in the series, and does a good job making this design actually a bit creepy. The other reason is because Toy Chica actually had a surprisingly massive part in the lore, but not in FNAF 2. If you were around during the time of FNAF 4, I'm sure the line, "Why would the tiny Toy Chica be missing her beak?" is burned into your brain. This came from the official website, which Scott was updating in real time during a Game Theory livestream with hints for the lore. There were 3 hints in total, but this was by far the most specific, and that specificity led to Dream Theory. Okay, yeah, I don't like Dream Theory, but I definitely think it was the original intention of FNAF 4. There is no other reasoning for this Toy Chica hint besides the other games being in the dreams of the crying child. Luckily, the FNAF series has moved away from that, and now this clue means literally nothing. But it is still pretty iconic, so that helped Toy Chica stand out a bit for me too. She does also get her own animated cutscenes in Ultimate Custom Night, so I guess that helps her out even more. 38, Pig Patch. Now it's time for our 4th mediocre melody. This one may be a bit surprising to some to see so high up, but honestly, I just find the stupid banjo he plays after every voice line really funny.
Even monkeys fall from trees. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down.
It makes him so much more memorable than the others in the group, with one obvious exception. The only downside is that he doesn't actually get a vengeful spirit voice line like the other 3 we've seen so far. But it's okay because... Plus, Pig Patch already gets much more ominous voice lines than the other mediocre melodies, which I think makes the contrast with playing the banjo after each one even funnier.
If you sit by the river long enough, you will see the body of your enemy float by.
37, Lolbit. The Lolbit with Lolbit where you have to type LOL is a bit funny. Technically they are a FNAF World character, but since they appear in both Sister Location and Ultimate Custom Night, they're fair game for the list. In both games it's in, the only way to defend against them is by typing LOL, which is an insanely specific thing to do, but that's what makes it funny. Design-wise, it is just a Funtime Foxy recolor, but I like the orange and purple color scheme quite a bit. They also have absolutely zero lore relevance and is never explained in any way, but hey, Lolbit is still peak in my book. I can't wait for Rafflebit to come next. 36, Toy Bonnie. Okay, I'll be totally honest, Toy Bonnie 100% would have been lower on this list, but then MatPat was announced as the voice of Toy Bonnie for the FNAF 2 movie, and that's kind of the best thing to ever happen. Toy Bonnie's existence has now been made infinitely funnier because now I can just imagine him as MatPat Game Theory.
I just simultaneously whipped and nay-nayed!
His performance is by far the thing I'm looking forward to the most in the new film. As for the games themselves, I don't really have any strong feelings about him. He's very basic in FNAF 2, though I do kind of like his special trait of actually moving in front of the mask when you hide in it. The main thing about him that I would say I like is the fact that he's one of the animatronics to have a rare screen appear whenever you die or open the game. These are always really eerie, and I think they did a great job with this Toy Bonnie shot to make his goofier design actually appear menacing. But yeah, he's mostly up here because of MatPat. 35, Rockstar Foxy. Compared to even the other Rockstars, he got a pretty big role in Ultimate Custom Night. Every so often, even if he's not turned on, his parrot will fly across the room. If clicked, the player can get the choice between 4 different things to help them through the night. It's nice to have a more helpful animatronic, and it kind of reminds me of the Foxy is a good guy theory from FNAF 1. His voice is really what sells it though, as he has a line whenever he pops up.
Yar, me bird likes you, so I'll do ye a favor.
But don't be fooled. He's not all good, because he can also randomly kill you. That's right, Rockstar Foxy is a gambling machine. I love gambling! I also love his voice line before he actually murders you.
Yar, you win some, you lose some.
I quote this all the time, so that helped him a bunch on this list. 34, Balloon Boy.
Hi.
He's been tormenting the FNAF community ever since FNAF 2. I like that Scott randomly threw in a humanoid animatronic, but he still fits with the style of the Fazbear brand. Plus he's also perfectly annoying to fit with his design. He won't kill you if he gets into your office, but since he disables your flashlight, you might as well be dead. This all by itself would make for a decent character, but the part that really brings him up into B tier is his voice. Before many of the other animatronics got real voice acting, Balloon Boy has always been able to talk.
Hello?
Each of his voice clips fit with him being an annoying little kid, and that makes him such a memorable character. 33, Nightmare Bonnie, 32, Nightmare Freddy and the Freddles, 31, Nightmare Foxy, and 30, Nightmare Chica. Now it may seem kind of crazy to basically have all 4 of the main nightmares tied together, but that's just because they're here for the exact same reason. First off, I do quite like all of the nightmare designs. They're totally unrealistic and weird, but that's what makes them fit as nightmares. I'm not sure if I would call them the scariest since they do go a bit over the top, but I think in this case that's fine. Beside their solid designs though, the main reason they're up so high is because I saw a funny tweet about them. Now I for the life of me can't find this tweet again, but essentially it was someone, with full sincerity, theorizing that the FNAF 4 teaser photos with each of the nightmare animatronics were meant to replicate the FNAF 4 bullies' reactions to the bite of 83. This is the funniest theory ever. For the next several days on Twitter, I was dying laughing looking at all the quote retweets for this theory. Several people made artwork of the faces the bullies made to this horrific event, and I think it was my favorite day on Twitter.com. So every single time I see the nightmares, I get reminded of this, so that boosted them up quite a bit. As for their order in this list, that's based on which reaction I think would be the funniest for the bullies to pull as a child gets chomped in front of them. Nightmare Bonnie's is definitely the most normal, and you can kinda see this one as him being shocked. Nightmare Freddy on the other hand just holds up the number 4. Freddy, a kid's dying, why are you doing that? Then Nightmare Foxy is fantastic because not only is the absurd tongue in this photo, but it's even funnier because Foxy is Michael Afton, so this is how he's reacting to his brother's death that he caused. But the best reaction has to be Nightmare Chica, as it's so cold and sinister for no reason. The Chica bully knew this was gonna happen. So yeah, thank you so much for the person who made this theory because I genuinely love it and it's now my official headcanon. Also, these rankings include both the Freddles and Nightmare Cupcake. I like their mechanics in the game, but the ranking was definitely carried by the funny tweet. 29, Mr. Hippo. And we have finally reached the best mediocre melody, and I highly doubt that I'll have any pushback against this. That is simply because he just has a really good bit for Ultimate Custom Night. As I've said throughout this video, many characters get special lines after jump scaring you. Mr. Hippo just tells a whole story.
My friend, you have met a terrible, terrible demise. But, you know, I don't feel too bad about it. After all, if If it weren't from me, it would have just been from someone else, you know?
These stories are incredibly long and completely meaningless, but that's what makes them so funny. I love the way he also fades in on the death screen while talking. It really adds a lot to this. So from one yapper to another, Mr. Hippo is peak.
I said to him, Orville, not every story has to have significance, you know?
28 Circus Baby and 27 Scrap Baby. In stark contrast to a totally meaningless character, we have one of the series' most important. Of course, Baby is the star of Sister Location and is being possessed by Elizabeth Afton. Pretty much the entire game is about her and her plan to escape the facility. Throughout a lot of the game, you're able to hear her talking to you, and I think they handle her story pretty well. I also like that we get to hear Elizabeth herself talking between the nights. And then we get to see the horrifying result of her conversations in the Baby minigame. William Afton, after the animatronics he made to kill kids, kills his kids. She is the best representation of how William Afton destroyed his own family in pursuit of whatever it is he's going after that's still controversial. And then of course in Pizzeria Simulator, she's one of the 4 main animatronics that needed to be destroyed in the ending fire. It's kinda sad that we don't get to see Baby get ejected from Ennard in the games themselves, but at least we do know that this happens from outside sources, I guess. Plus I also quite like Baby's voice in both games, and she's the one that gets interrupted during the connection terminated speech.
Watch. Listen, and be full.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed.
Now with Baby being such an important character that she basically has a game all about her, what makes me put Baby only in the B tier? Honestly, I just never loved the character design that much. I guess just because I'm not a fan of how clowns look, and that's kind of the vibe I get from her. Scrap Baby gets to be above Normal Baby because I do like her design more, though not so much that I felt like they needed to be too separate on the list. The controlled shot gameplay at the start of Pizzeria Simulator is pretty cool too, and since they introduced that with Scrap Baby, she's the one I associate it with the most. Oh, and just as an extra note, I always found it weird that Baby couldn't kill you at all in Sister Location. I get that she's supposed to be long-term scheming for Ennard, but she could have at least been in the non-canon Custom Night. That leaves her only real non-VR jump scare as Ultimate Custom Night, which infamously has terrible jump scares. So yeah, she's certainly an important character, but just not one that I've ever clicked with as hard as some of the other major players. Also, I have no clue what all the Baby plushes mean in the new games, but I guess you can include them here too. 26, Shadow Freddy. Here we have another Easter egg character, but he's always been one of the more fascinating ones to me. He first appears in FNAF 2 and can rarely appear in the parts and service room. I've always loved the design of the Shadow animatronics, as they look so eerie being pitch black with bright white eyes and teeth. He doesn't do anything and is just a reuse of Golden Freddy's model, but the mystery behind him has always kept him in my mind. That's especially because in FNAF 3, he seemingly works for William Afton in some way. During the nighttime minigames, he'll attract each of the animatronics to William to get destroyed. As far as I know, there isn't any concrete explanation as to what Shadow Freddy is or why he appears when he does. Due to him having that extra bit of sinister lore relevance, I think that pushes him a lot higher than a lot of the other Easter egg characters in the series. Oh, and before I forget, he can also rarely appear in the FNAF 3 office, though he's a lot harder to spot than he was in the parts and service room. 25, Yendo. I think 99% of the FNAF community hates this guy or thinks he sucks. Back off the goat. He started as another Easter egg character in Sister Location, being an unexplainable mess of wires. He's not Funtime Freddy because he has yellow eyes, but as far as I know, there's never been a satisfactory answer for what he's supposed to be. It's not in the same way as Shadow Freddy though, where it's fun to speculate because he's cool and ominous. Yendo just kind of appears and no one has any leads on what to make of it. Because of that, most people just see him as a weird and dumb background character, but that is also the reason I find so much joy in him. The few screenshots we have of Yendo look ridiculous, but in a funny way. Plus, he was also an enemy in Sister Location's Custom Night. And Baby wasn't, that's still crazy. His jump scare is also just as goofy to me as the rest of his existence. He just sort of chomps at your face, and it's just so bad that it's good. So yeah, my love for Yendo is definitely an ironic one, but he's still my goat and belongs high up on the list. 24, Montgomery Gator. Back to the security breach era of games, we have another one of the main 4. Unlike the others, he's a totally unique design that we haven't seen before, being based on an alligator. I've always just really liked his design. The green and purple color scheme is great, along with his very awesome sunglasses. I also like his personality of being a bit more of a tough guy, which I think aligns pretty well with the design he got. It also makes it funny with how his shattered and ruined designs get more and more pathetic until there's practically nothing left of him. Of course, the big standout part of Monty would have to be the conspiracy of who killed Glam Glamrock Bonnie. Monty was originally just part of the golfing area of the Pizzaplex until replacing Glamrock Bonnie in the main band. So that brings up the question, was Monty involved with the murder? This is still a question that hasn't been fully answered yet as to who is responsible, but I think that makes it more fun. Monty is of course the main suspect, but there's also Vanny, the Mimic, or even just Monty but under their control. It had some interesting depth to his character, so even if I'm not totally sure how much more of him we'll see, I did like the part he played in Security Breach's story. Even if it's revealed that he didn't do the murder, I liked him as a solid red herring, so his place on the list wouldn't change. 23, Ballora. And we've made it to our final entrant of B tier. When Sister Location first came out, I was not a huge fan of Ballora myself, but she's definitely grown on me over time by having a lot of interesting elements revolving around her. The main reason I didn't love her at first was because of the design. I just don't find the ballerina look that interesting. But just about every other aspect of the character is pretty great. Despite me not loving the design from afar, I do love the fact that she always has her eyes closed. That's because it makes her jump scare in Sister Location way better as she stares directly into the player. That's easily the best Sister Location jump scare in terms of creepiness and using the faceplates. I also think her voice plays a part in how creepy she is. It strikes that perfect balance of being both soothing and eerie.
I could hear you breathing.
Speaking of sound, I really like how she works in both of the games she's in. In Sister Location and Ultimate Custom Night, you have to use the sound of her music to determine where she is and avoid her accordingly. Anytime you have to listen closely to sounds in a game like this, it automatically makes it much more terrifying for me. And on top of all this, Ballora does have some interesting theories behind her as well in terms of how she ties into the overall plot. The main one being that she's somehow meant to represent Mrs. Afton. A lot of her voice lines seem to point towards some sort of connection between her and William.
Admit it. You wanted to let me in. Don't be shy.
Plus, in Security Breach, there's an Easter egg with a bunch of staff bots that are meant to resemble the Afton family. For Mrs. Afton, the staff bot has a striking resemblance to Ballora. This is definitely a pretty interesting theory, especially since we have nothing else on Mrs. Afton at all. Why William would make Ballora based on his wife is a whole other question, but it has kept the character fairly relevant even to this day. But now it's time we move on up to our A tier. These are the characters I'm a pretty big fan of, though they still don't quite reach the S tier. Starting off, we have 22, Candy Cadet. I was heavily on the fence on including him because, spoilers, I did not include other Pizzeria Simulator animatronics like the Juice Clown, Security Puppet, and so on. For the most part, if they didn't show up in Ultimate Custom Night, I didn't count them for the list. The reason I made an exception for Candy Cadet is because he's shown up in several games and has given helpful hints towards the lore in each of his appearances. Plus, as you can tell by him making it up into A tier, I quite like Candy Cadet. Not only does he have a funny little design, but his voice matches the eerie stories he tells perfectly.
Now I will tell you a story. A story about a kind man who would visit 5 orphans and bring them toys and gladness. The man lived alone.
Now, I definitely don't have time to go over what each of these stories means in detail because there are several videos made by many different creators just trying to get to the bottom of what they can mean. From what I can tell, his Pizzeria Simulator stories seem to tie into the fact that the MCI kids are part of Molten Freddy, and his later stories in both Ruin and Help Wanted 2 talk about the Mimic. I just love the cold way he talks with his text-to-speech voice, and I always get excited whenever he comes back with a new cryptic story. 21, Roxy. I mean, come on guys, she's a wolf. She's just like me! She's another one of the Security Breach main 4, and her design was already pretty good in that game alone. The best part about her character, though, is definitely the role she plays in Ruin. She's the favorite animatronic of the main character Cassie, and I think the connection they share throughout the game is pretty cute. Roxy sort of acts like her Glamrock Freddy, and I think they execute that idea pretty well, with Roxy even coming to Cassie's defense near the end. It's still not very clear what happens to either of those two at the end of Ruin, but I really hope we get to see more Roxy in the future. 20, Funtime Freddy. Like I mentioned during Bonbon's segment, I really like that they mixed up his design by giving him a Bonnie hand puppet. The white and pink color scheme also works exceptionally well and sets this design even further apart from other Freddy renditions throughout the franchise. But the main reason I like Funtime Freddy, of course, comes down to the voice.
I know you're over there somewhere. Get ready for a surprise.
This is the first role that Kellen Goff played in the series, and he's basically become the main voice of Freddy, as he also plays Glamrock Freddy and Toy Freddy in the upcoming movie. Overall, I just think this is a great design with a pretty great voice. 19, DJ Music Man. He definitely got the coolest portion of Security Breach, which is what's carrying him up this high on the list. He is absolutely the largest animatronic in the franchise, which makes it extra horrifying when he starts chasing you down. His entire portion of the game acts as one big escape sequence that I just thought was extremely well done. That in large part also comes down to the fantastic song that plays throughout the whole thing. I have listened to this banger a ton outside of the game. It's easily one of my favorite tracks in the series. The only thing really holding him back is that he doesn't have any lore to go with him, at least as far as I can tell. But for having one of the series' best done boss sequences, along with having a great design that complements that, I think DJ Music Man deserves placing up in A tier. 18, Bonnie. And we've finally made it to our second member of the classic four. It's still pretty hard to talk about these guys because their legacy really does just speak for itself. I've always liked Bonnie because of his blue color scheme, and he acts as the first real animatronic you have to face in the series. Compared to Chica, I do like his base design a bit more, and I think they got much more mileage out of it being creepy. In fact, of the FNAF 1 animatronics, he probably has the best camera renders of the bunch when it comes to being scary. Of course, he has the iconic stare into the camera backstage, but I also love the side eye he gives when he's right near the door. Bonnie is also one of the characters to get those rare opening screens where a hollow version of the head stares at the player. When I was younger, I actually got this when I was first playing through the game, and it absolutely terrified me, so I definitely think it works in Bonnie's favor. Plus, being one of the main four, he also has plenty of funny images and gifs revolving around him. He's an absolute classic for a good reason, though there are definitely versions of the character that I like more. 17, Helpy. Yeah, honestly, Helpy is just kind of funny. He mostly appears in Pizzeria Simulator as a little helper, and he adds a lot of personality to the game. Pretty much all of his animations I find funny in some way, but the best are definitely the ones where he fails a minigame and just snaps his neck. I also like that he keeps making cameo appearances. In the modern games, he appears as Helpy spelled with an I, and you also have to operate on the original Helpy in Help Wanted 2. That minigame is also very funny as he just keeps screaming and making things difficult. Plus, there's also the theory that he somehow smuggled the Mimic program by escaping the Pizzeria Simulator fire. Not really sure how much ground that still holds after Secret of the Mimic, but the idea of Helpy becoming extremely lore relevant is quite funny to me. Overall, he's just a very successful comic relief character that I'm happy to see whenever he shows up. 16, Lefty. And here we have reached easily my favorite of the main Pizzeria Simulator crew. On a first playthrough, Lefty is a total oddball because it's a bit unclear who he's even supposed to be. I love that you can even buy Lefty without having to do the salvage minigame, though he is incredibly expensive. Once he's in the building though, it's still a bit unclear why his presence is necessary to get the main ending. Well, if you happen to get one of the rare alleyway screens that each of the four main characters have, you may be able to notice the puppet's design peeking out under Lefty's shell a bit. There are also other hints dropped throughout the game, like Lefty's blueprints and the fact that Henry states the puppet is present. So Lefty was made specifically to bring the puppet here, and I think that was a really cool way to handle the character for this game. It created a good mystery that is clearly able to be solved in the same game. Having a mystery that's both fun to go through and also has a satisfying and concrete answer is a rarity in this franchise. So for that, I like Lefty quite a bit, and of course, seeing as we haven't had the puppet appear in the ranking yet, me liking the puppet also plays a big part in that. I also just like Lefty's design being a black and slightly messed up version of Rockstar Freddy. The voice Lefty gets in Ultimate Custom Night is also quite haunting, as it's a weaker version of the puppet's main voice. They just handled everything with Lefty perfectly. Oh, and I know this is totally random, but if Freddy ever got added to Smash Bros, I would 100% main the Lefty ult. 15, Shadow Bonnie. Ugh, fine. I mean RWQFSFASXC. I could have changed a letter in that name and none of you would have noticed. Anyway, Shadow Bonnie was the other Shadow character added alongside Shadow Freddy in FNAF 2. In my opinion though, I always found this one to be more terrifying. I think that comes down to a few reasons. For starters, he appears in the office, which brings him a lot closer to the actual player. He'll also crash your game if you look at him for too long, which adds a sense of urgency to the very rare scenario where he actually appears. And I mean rare. He's supposed to have a 1 in 1 million chance to ever spawn, though due to some whack coding, the chance is more like 1 in 16,384. Still extremely rare to see though, and the terror of spotting him is added onto even more by its design. It takes a similar approach to Shadow Freddy, but I think the execution here was a bit better. Not only is he pitch black instead of the slightly purple color Shadow Freddy had, he also just looks like a shadow. It feels like there's no three-dimensional depth to him, which I actually like in this case as it makes him feel extra eerie. That's also on top of him floating in the office, adding more to his ghostly vibe. What I think brings it up so much higher than Shadow Freddy though would have to be its appearance in other games. In FNAF 3, he gets his own minigame, and it's probably the most in-depth of the bunch as you have to glitch through all of the other minigames seen during the other nights. I also just like how his sprite looks, it's a lot more creepy than the others. He's also one of the secret animatronics in Ultimate Custom Night who will darken the office whenever he appears. So to me, he's just a creepier version of Shadow Freddy that gets to appear more often throughout the series. But at the same time, he's just as mysterious and unexplainable too, making him one of my favorite characters to see in the franchise. 14. And here we have the main antagonist of the current era of games. Of course he is a bit hard to talk about seeing as his story is far from over, but what we got so far has been incredibly interesting. As the name suggests, he's all about mimicking, and he was originally created by Yeah, what he said. The story behind the Mimic's creation is really interesting, as Edwin seemingly used it to cope with the death of his wife Fiona. That is, until Edwin and the Mimic took a bit of a violent turn after— My name is David, there is a and now the Mimic is set to be an insane murder robot who is seemingly responsible for everything that has happened after Help Wanted. We'll have to see where the story goes, but so far he's seeming to be a fun follow-up villain to William Afton. I especially like how he was used in Ruin, tricking Cassie into thinking Gregory was there when really it was him all along. Now, with all of that being said, this guy was the most confusing person to rank in this entire video. That is thanks to Secret of the Mimic, because I think every animatronic in that game is just the Mimic. Jackie, Dolly, Big Top, the costume characters, and so on are all just him. There are also seemingly 2 Mimics out there, but I didn't know if it made sense to count them separately. But then there's also the weird Moon Guy and Tiger plush that I don't think are the Mimic, but I also can't prove that. And add on that I've been very busy this last year and haven't been able to keep up with theories as much as I want, and I was just lost on what to do with the Mimic. So I decided to take the lazy way out and just rank the Mimic for all of these guys. So Jackie, Dolly, Big Top, and so on are all under this placement. If you're mad at me for that, I apologize, but I don't have very strong feelings about any of the other characters besides the Mimic itself. Plus, I don't even think these 2 are animatronics, so they may not belong on the list, period. Anyway, the Mimic seems to be a very good antagonist, and I can't wait to see where he goes in the story. 13. Funtime Foxy. Of the Funtime animatronics, this guy is definitely my favorite. Design-wise, he's sort of similar to what most would imagine Mangle looking like when it's not mangled. I think the color scheme suits Foxy extremely well, but the main reason he gets to be so high on the list is just because he has one of my favorite voices in the franchise. In Ultimate Custom Night, he requires the player to look at his camera at a specific time or else they'll instantly die. It's a kind of cool spin on the original Foxy's camera mechanics in the first game, as Funtime Foxy is meant to be more of a showman. So to fit with that mechanic, he got a more showman-like voice.
It seems you couldn't make it to my show, so I brought the show to you. Show times are on the hour, not a moment before and not a moment later.
I just think it adds a ton of personality to him, and it makes an otherwise pretty lore-relevant character to one of the more memorable ones for me. 12. Foxy. Following that up with the original, we have one of the biggest fan favorites in the franchise. When FNAF 1 first came out, he was definitely my favorite of the group. I mean, he's a pirate fox. Who doesn't love pirates? He also had probably the most unique gameplay mechanic of the original 4, as you had to try and stun him in place by constantly checking the cameras. If you failed to do that, he would then come sprinting down the hall. Since all of the other camera shots had the animatronic standing mostly still, Foxy's sudden sprint sticks out way more. He was an important addition to make sure the player doesn't just cheese the game by never using the cameras, and I think they handled him almost perfectly. Almost. Yeah, he has one of the weakest jump scares in the series, unfortunately. It had to have him coming out of the door because of the way his mechanics work, but him being so far away makes him feel a lot less scary. The jump scare is so bad that there was infamously a theory that Foxy is a good guy? Even with this weak jump scare though, his design is perfect, his personality of being a sly pirate is great, and he's undeniably extremely iconic. 11. Nightmare Fredbear. And here we have finally reached the main antagonist of FNAF 4. Up until this point in the series, Golden Freddy was always the extremely mysterious animatronic with pretty much no explanation. This game was definitely the character's biggest up until that point, as Fredbear is of course responsible for—
Was that the bite of—
83. Nightmare Fredbear being the final boss you have to face is so perfect after a great deal of build-up throughout the entire game. His design is horrifying, perfectly matching how the crying child felt about the animatronics before and surely after the bite. I love that he replaces all the other animatronics during the night, feeling like a proper special boss fight for the series. I also like that he's not just a recolor of Nightmare Freddy, as he's got a much bigger build to fit with the Fredbear animatronic. This character adds so much weight to how important of a moment the bite of 83 is for the franchise. In my opinion, it's really the inciting incident that causes all the deaths we see throughout the series. Of course, we still have normal Golden Freddy to talk about in this list, so I won't be going too much beyond what we have in FNAF 4, but what we do get in this game is pretty great. Plus, he also has one of my favorite voices in Ultimate Custom Night.
We know who our friends are, and you are not one of them. Let me put you back together, then take you apart all over again.
It mixes the haunting nature of the nightmares with the strained voice of a child in a really well done way. It matches the character perfectly and made me like him even more than I already did. But now we have finally made it, the top 10 animatronics in S tier. It has been a long video up until this point, so now it's finally time we see who I consider to be the best of the best. 10. Mangle. She is easily the best designed out of the toy animatronics. When I first played FNAF 2, he absolutely horrified me. The concept of the kids breaking and putting an animatronic back together over and over again is so creative and made this freakish design actually make sense to be here. They also get great use out of Mangle's design in FNAF 2 as it has one of the most unique mechanics among the group. If he gets into the office, she'll cling to the ceiling for a random amount of time. That means there is still a chance to survive the night even with her up there, but you'll be on extra edge the entire time because Mangle could always just... While she's up there, Mangle will also play this very distinct static sound effect. This is one of my favorite uses of audio in the franchise, as it makes Mangle's presence so much more memorable and terrifying. I use the static sound effect all the time in videos, so of course I had to give Mangle a boost because of it. On top of the fantastic visual and audio design, Mangle also has a good chunk of theories about them as well. My favorite of course being that Mangle is responsible for the actual bite of 87. We know FNAF 2 takes place in 1987, and Mangle's jump scare looks like she's taking a bite out of our brain. Plus, Phone Guy also tells us to stay close to the animatronics on the last day, meaning that Jeremy Fitzgerald is also likely the victim of the bite. Even if the bite of 87 is pretty irrelevant to the overall story, it's extremely iconic and I think it adds a ton to Mangle's character. There's also the theory that Mangle is possessed by Susie's dog, the girl who goes on to possess Chica. I don't necessarily think that one is true, but I also wouldn't be opposed to it as it's a fun idea with some decent evidence. Oh, and also, whenever we need to know the time, me and my brother constantly quote,
"Oi, Mangle, what time is it?"
It's about 5:59.
So for having one of the creepiest designs in the franchise, along with a decent amount of theories too, I think Mangle absolutely deserves their placement in S tier. 9. Nightmare Ione. I mentioned Nightmare being replaced by a different animatronic way earlier in the video, and it's finally time we made it to that replacement. He came out in the FNAF 4 Halloween DLC and has refused to leave the franchise ever since. This more nightmarish and organic remix of the puppet's design is absolutely horrifying. I especially love how this applies to its jump scare. Like Nightmare, he gets another still image jump scare, which are always exciting to see. While I don't think the image used is as scary at first glance, I love how brightening the image reveals that his eyes are actually 3D models. It makes the whole design and jump scare even creepier knowing that it has full eyes inside its mask. But the main reason I'm comfortable putting Nightmare Ione in S tier is because I think it works way better than Nightmare as a representation of death in the FNAF franchise. There is a fantastic video by the YouTuber Ozone that explains a lot of the elements in much greater detail that I highly recommend checking out. Of course, there's the fact that it replaces Nightmare on the night Crying Child would be dying, but there's even more than that. Since the puppet is meant to be the one that gives life in the series, the puppet's Nightmare version being the one to represent death is even more fitting. Even in the modern era of games, Nightmare Ione still lingers through plushes hidden around the Pizzaplex. The destroyed staff bots are also clearly meant to replicate his look. Even if he's not technically there in the flesh, his presence is certainly felt. My favorite piece of evidence that supports the death representation theory though, is the fact that Nightmare Ione is used as the face of Ultimate Custom Night. Despite Golden Freddy clearly being the main antagonist, Scott chose Nightmare Ione to be the face of the game all about William Afton's death. This character is just one of the most haunting symbolically across the franchise, and I'm so happy he's still being used in subtle ways to this day. Nightmare in comparison has barely left FNAF 4, which is why I'm comfortable saying that Nightmare Ione has totally replaced it in canon. Or they might even just be the same character. Oh, and to add on even more, he gets some pretty great lines in Ultimate Custom Night.
I am the fearful reflection of what you have created. This is a nightmare that you won't wake from.
In the end, I think Nightmare Ione is one of the most haunting characters in the entire series, but in a more symbolic way than the other in-your-face scary animatronics. For that reason, it has more than deserved to place in the S tier. Oh, also I left a comment on that video I mentioned before and got a reply asking what I was doing there. I replied with FNAF to be funny, but then the entire rest of the chain was... 8. Withered Bonnie. When I said I liked the Withered animatronics, I was not kidding. We haven't seen a single one since Withered Freddy, which means all of the others made it into the top 10. That's because their designs are pretty perfect. They make the original 4 much more creepy, but they don't go over the top with it. Of the 3 we still have left, I would actually say that Withered Bonnie probably has my favorite design of the bunch. The missing face is such a simple change to the original that makes him so much creepier. I also think that ties well into his FNAF 2 jump scare, which kinda looks like he's trying to steal your face. All of this would have been enough to put him in my top 10 just due to how fantastic the design is, but Ultimate Custom Night also gave him a really cool voice.
What is this new person? Is it me trapped or is it you? Perhaps it's us both.
I love how broken and robotic it sounds. Plus he's also got puns.
Time, place, consequences of your behavior.
He may not have any real lore relevance, theories, or even a special gameplay mechanic, but the design has always stuck out with me to the point where I can't see myself ever putting it outside of S tier. 7. Springtrap. Just in case you are missing lore relevance with that last entry, we have the main antagonist of the entire franchise. Due to how major of a character he is, there's no way I can cover everything in this short segment. Springtrap is of course being controlled by the purple guy, William Afton. Springtrap is such a perfect fate for a character who did so many heinous things in his lifetime. Following the death of Crying Child, he murdered a lot of other kids. It's unknown if this was done in some way to bring his son back, get revenge, or to just give himself immortality, but in the end, it really doesn't matter. He took all of their lives and cursed them to possess animatronics for years, so him ending up spring-locked and trapped in the very suit he used to kill those kids is extremely fitting. I love how the first 3 games tell William Afton's story through the Atari-style minigames. Even if we don't get to see much of his motivation directly, seeing the actions and place it leaves him in is incredibly satisfying. And of course, as an animatronic, Springtrap is one of the best designed as well. It combines the rotted look of an animatronic costume with the decaying human remains of William Afton in such a perfect way. We even get to see that in better detail with FNAF 3's rare startup screens, which are probably the creepiest across the entire franchise. It makes complete sense why Springtrap has become so iconic, probably the most iconic character outside of the original game. I love how Springtrap fits the narrative as both a punishment and an intimidating threat in FNAF 3. There's so much more that could be said about William Afton's character, but I think it's fair to leave it here for now. Oh no wait, I forgot his jump scare sucks. Yeah, that definitely hurts him quite a bit, but Scott did say his jump scares being bad is part of the reason the franchise is still going on to this day, so thanks Springtrap for making sure this franchise always comes back.
I always come back.
6. Freddy Fazbear. Of course, the face of the franchise himself had to be an S tier. Everything about him is iconic, and deservedly so. In my opinion, this is a perfect character design. I mentioned this about all the FNAF 1 crew, but that's especially the case here. He both looks like he could be an incredibly cute children's mascot that could be merchandised till the end of time, and also a terrifying murder bot under the right lighting. I have seen so many people attempt to change Freddy's design to make him better, and they almost always just miss the mark. Trying to make him more creepy loses the cutesy charm he needs to fit as a mascot. This design already strikes a perfect balance of the two seemingly opposite feelings the model needs to give off. Every time I see Freddy brought into real life, whether it be for the movie or iShowSpeed, he looks like a mascot that I would legitimately want to meet. And this is just talking about his design. We also have to talk about his iconic power outage jump scare in the first game. That jingle is burned into the mind of every FNAF fan. Of course, Torador March is not a FNAF original song, but the way every comment section under this song talks about FNAF, you'd certainly think it was. The power mechanic was extremely well done in this first game, and I especially love how the amount of time Freddy takes is random. You are still able to win even during the power outage phase, which makes it feel so much more tense as you're hoping that Freddy plays this song for as long as possible. From both a design and gameplay perspective, I think Freddy Fazbear is pretty perfect. Really the only thing holding him back from being higher in the list is that he surprisingly has basically no lore relevance. Yeah, despite being the face of the franchise, he's not particularly special besides being possessed by one of the MCI kids. But even without the strong lore carry, you can't hate Freddy Fazbear. Plus to make up for that, he's got by far the most memes out of any character. 5. Withered Chica.
Begin audio prompt in 3, 2, 1.
While I do prefer Withered Bonnie's design, Withered Chica's is pretty strong too. She stands sort of like a weird scarecrow thing as she T-poses almost everywhere she goes. It makes her feel so much weirder than the other Withereds, which is on top of having 2 sets of teeth. But if I think Withered Bonnie's design is better, what's bringing Withered Chica up higher? That would have to be her appearance in Ultimate Custom Night. First off, her getting stuck in the vent is pretty funny. But most important are her voice lines, which me and my friends quote constantly.
I was the first. I have seen everything.
We somehow always find a way to bring this line up in conversation, and that's probably because it's such a memorable one. It's pretty lore relevant too, as it gives direct confirmation that Susie was at least the first MCI kid that William murdered. In turn, that shows that the Susie minigame in FNAF 6 depicts the very first murder William commits in the spring Bonnie suit. Withered Chica also gets another pretty iconic and lore relevant line too.
I have seen him, the one you shouldn't have killed.
A few others also referred to the one you should not have killed, but Withered Chica's is the one that stuck out the most to me over the years. And on top of her very iconic voice lines, there are just a lot of funny Withered Chica images that I use a lot in videos. I like the one where she's staring daggers into the camera, along with this one where she just looks miserable. Withered Chica is really just the sum of a lot of small things coming together to make a surprisingly memorable character. Her lines are my favorite in Ultimate Custom Night, so combined with a really strong design, I think that's enough to bring her into my top 5. 4. Glamrock Freddy. And here we have made it to the big main star of Security Breach. Even though I've made it clear that I generally prefer the classic set of games, Glamrock Freddy has really stood out as a character. Throughout the game, Freddy helps Gregory survive the Pizzaplex by letting him crawl inside his stomach hatch, along with doing a bunch of other stuff. Of course, being a helpful guy is nice, but the main reason I like him is because of his personality. He's easily the most charming animatronic in the series, as his voice just makes him seem extremely pleasant to be around.
This is where I must stay. Do not return. It will never be safe. I will miss you.
He's definitely got a lot of extremely quotable lines throughout the game, plus his voice is just kind of fun to impersonate.
Have you ever heard of Among Us, Gregory?
You can really feel the connection he and Gregory develop throughout the game, and it's really nice to see them both escape the Pizzaplex together in the main ending. Of course, on top of just being a fun animatronic to be around, Glamrock Freddy also seems to have some extra significance to the plot. There has to be some reason that he helps out while the other animatronics try to attack Gregory, though this reasoning is still not fully clear. My personal favorite theory is that he's being possessed by the spirit of Michael Afton. Generally, I prefer the classic character staying gone, but this is actually one exception I'm willing to make. Michael Afton is my goat because I'm Michael, he's literally me! But more importantly, I like the idea that after accidentally killing his younger brother and failing to protect his sister, Michael finally gets the chance to save a kid through Glamrock Freddy. There's also plenty of evidence outside of narrative satisfaction, such as the good ending screenshots seemingly drawing parallels to all of the Afton kids, and of course Freddy's voice line. Even if Glamrock Freddy turns out not to be Michael, or even possessed at all, what we get of him in Security Breach is more than enough to justify the top 5 placement. He's got a great connection with Gregory, the other animatronics, and you especially feel for him with the Glamrock Bonnie situation, as they seem to be extremely close. Glamrock Freddy is the friendliest animatronic in the series, and is 100% the one I would want to meet the most in real life. Mostly because the others would kill me. 3. Withered Foxy. I think there's a pretty simple reason he places up so high on the list. He has the most iconic jump scare in the series. Ask anyone to replicate any FNAF jump scare, and this is probably the one they would picture. After Foxy's initial jump scare was complete garbage in FNAF 1, seeing the withered counterpart lunge towards you from the hallway is so much more terrifying. More than any other jump scare, Withered Foxy's is the one that I see referenced the most in outside media. It was also very important that this jump scare was so good because Withered Foxy is vital for FNAF 2's gameplay loop. I mentioned before that FNAF 2 is one of my favorite games in the franchise, and I think that's because the gameplay loop does a great job of feeling very tense. Unlike most of the other animatronics, Withered Foxy is not fooled by the Freddy mask. Personality-wise, that already adds to his character by making him feel a lot smarter, but that also changes how we have to fight against him. Instead of being able to camp in the mask, we have to instead flash our light at Foxy whenever we can. This is a whole lot easier said than done though, as we are constantly getting crowded by other animatronics and the music box. Foxy doesn't have any sort of indication for how long he has before he attacks you, which makes every single second we're not flashing him feel extra terrifying. That makes the sudden nature of his jump scare blasting out from the hallway all the more scary too. So even if Withered Foxy really doesn't have much lore relevance, he is absolutely an icon of the franchise with a fantastic gameplay mechanic, even better jump scare, and an overall great design. I definitely think he belongs up in this top 3. Oh yeah, he also has a rare startup image. Ooh, spooky. 2. Golden Freddy. This entry includes basically all variants of the character, being his FNAF 1 appearance, FNAF 2 appearance, and even just standard Fredbear. To me, it's impossible to separate them in my mind because they all feel like one continuous character throughout the whole franchise. Golden Freddy is of course the original Easter egg character from all the way back in FNAF 1. First off, his broken down pose is incredibly iconic. Everyone loves pulling a Golden Freddy. Not only can he just randomly appear in the office like a ghost, but he gets a jump scare that's totally unique from anyone else. I may have lied just a little bit when I said Withered Foxy's jump scare is the most iconic, because this right here unleashed the mystery of Golden Freddy that stays strong throughout the entire series. As we eventually come to learn, Fredbear is the one responsible for the bite of 83, taking the life of the crying child and sending the entire story on a downward spiral. Because of this, the spirit of the crying child possessed Fredbear, which adds weight to the "it's me" text that often comes with a character. Now we know that Golden Freddy is essentially crying out to Michael Afton, who is a playable character throughout most of the series. But Golden Freddy isn't just possessed by one spirit. Following the crying child's death, William Afton took the lives of many other kids, one of which being Cassidy. Her death was especially painful, as he likely used the Golden Freddy suit's spring locks, which is implied by the fact that the puppet didn't give life to Golden Freddy. So essentially, Golden Freddy is two characters, Dave Afton the crying child and Cassidy the vengeful spirit. This adds yet another dimension to the "it's me" text, because maybe it's actually Cassidy threatening who she thinks is her killer. These two loom over the entire narrative of the classic games and absolutely earn their status as one of the series' most popular characters. Their endings are also both perfect, Dave Afton finally getting to move on, and Cassidy finally getting the chance to torment William after his death. I always loved the way Ultimate Custom Night wrapped up the series, as it took an idea that should be impossible to be canon and made it make perfect sense in the narrative. The ending cutscene of the game, where Golden Freddy continues to twitch as Cassidy is unable to move on, is genuinely quite chilling. She couldn't leave the demon to his demons, and thus she'll likely spend eternity torturing him with the monsters he created. I think the FNAF franchise completely stuck the landing with creating a mystery of what Golden Freddy is and giving that question a satisfying answer in multiple ways. Oh wait, sorry, I'm actually wrong! Golden Freddy isn't the vengeful spirit. Instead, it's some random 6 kid we've never heard about named Andrew! He's like an even more angry version of Cassidy, who possesses the Stitch Wraith, who we've also never seen before. He was introduced in the definitely 100% canon books that don't have any continuity issues with the main games whatsoever. He's got to be the main antagonist of the final game of the classic era. I mean, why wouldn't he be? Who needs story buildup in the actual medium most fans care about? I liked when somehow Palpatine returned in a Fortnite event. What does the Golden Freddy cutscene mean in Ultimate Custom Night if they aren't behind it? I don't know. What does the Fredbear Easter egg mean, or the fact that we play as Fredbear in the Old Man Consequences Easter egg? I don't know. Why would Cassidy's name require extra effort to find compared to the other MCI kids if she literally has 0 story relevance under Andrew? I don't know. Why would the max difficulty custom nights throughout the series be named Golden Freddy if not to act as a bit of foreshadowing? Oh, that's easy. If you rearrange the letters in Golden Freddy, you get some of the letters in Andrew. It's just like how some of the elements in the books line up with the games, so they must be fully canon. Parallels? What's that? Are you some kind of MatPat sympathizer? That's it. The darkest pit of hell has just opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, old friend. I'm sorry if that segment did not make sense to you, but I've seen far too many people say Andrew is the vengeful spirit in the games. But alright, now we can move on to my favorite animatronic. One, the puppet. Ever since Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the puppet has easily been my favorite character in the franchise. Its design is so different from every other character in the series, which to my younger self always made it the creepiest. Its thin, slender body, mixed with its generally black and white color scheme, contrasts so greatly with the colorful and bulky cast. That fear factor was also helped by its jump scare, which I remember barely even being able to look at when I was first playing the game. It's very similar to Withered Foxy, but the added eyes compared to the normal design always made it the scariest jump scare for me. And speaking of Withered Foxy, the puppet is also crucial for FNAF 2's gameplay loop that I love so much. Throughout the years, I have heard people express annoyance about having to wind the music box, but I always thought the mechanic was extremely well designed. You have to try and balance the amount of time you spend in the camera with the amount of time you spend flashing Foxy, and it creates a really fun dynamic. Without the puppet, FNAF 2 would absolutely not be as fun to play as it is. While we're on the topic of gameplay, I also decided to combine Phantom Puppet into this spot as well. That's because it's a bit unclear if Phantom Puppet is even a separate character, as we can actually see the puppet themselves appear in FNAF 3's camera. Phantom Puppet also easily has the most memorable and terrifying effect as it stares into your soul for several seconds while playing a loud noise. Even if I wasn't combining the two together, Phantom Puppet is clearly the best of the Phantoms. But gameplay and design is far from the only reason to like the puppet, as they are also a major character in the story. The several minigames throughout the series do a fantastic job telling her tragic tale. The puppet is possessed by the spirit of Charlie Emily, the daughter of Henry Emily, co-owner of Fazbear's. After the death of his son, William Afton went on a bit of a spiral. In a fit of drunken anger, he murdered Charlie outside of the restaurant for what I believe to be no real reason. The puppet animatronic was designed by Henry specifically to protect Charlie, and upon seeing her body, the puppet laid with her. Charlie's spirit then possessed the puppet, permanently staining the mask with her tear stains for the rest of the franchise. From this point on, the puppet acts as a bit of a leader for the other animatronics.
The others are under my protection.
She is the one that gave life to the MCI kids, which in turn were able to bring William to an end inside a Springtrap. After this, the puppet stayed around to ensure William would never come back. It's possible that she was even responsible for the FNAF 3 fire, though Michael Afton is also just as likely. Her spirit lingers on for many decades, until finally she got to be laid to rest by her father when she knew it was all over.
My daughter, if you can hear me, I knew you would return as well. It's in your nature to protect the innocent.
But I think my favorite thing the puppet did was finally be the one to give Crying Child his happiest day. We see the puppet and the others struggle to put Crying Child's spirit back together throughout FNAF 3 and FNAF World. Once the spirits receive their cake, the puppet is finally able to bring the Crying Child peace after all these decades. If the theory of William Afton murdering children to bring his son back to life is true, then I think that adds even more to this moment. As William continued to spiral, needlessly murdering so many innocent lives while leading himself and his other two children to death, the good souls of those that he murdered managed to be the ones to truly save Crying Child in the end. Like I said before, it's hard to know exactly what William's motives are. But regardless, the puppet seeing the son of the man who murdered her and still going through all of that effort to help him, I think makes her a fantastic character. Everything about the puppet, from their design, gameplay, and role in the story is perfect. Like Golden Freddy, I think they were built up and paid off perfectly, which is why I have no issue saying that the puppet is my favorite animatronic in Five Nights at Freddy's. She looms over every aspect of not only the FNAF franchise, but also this channel. You never knew it, but I was always there. But anyways, that's it for this incredibly long video. Are you a big fan of the wet floor signs and hate me for not mentioning them? Let me know in the comments. I hope this video was worth the wait because I've been wanting to make a FNAF video for a while now. I genuinely have no clue how this will do, but I'm pretty excited to put it out there. Even if I'm sure I'll be killed for making some sort of lore mistake. FNAF is confusing, guys, give me a break. Also, shoutouts to all the people who I've had to use footage from throughout this video. You can find links to all of the videos I've used in the description. But before I go, I've got to thank my members, being Wilbur, Stephen Hawley, Bleep3454, Knight, Jenny, Mogo Mogo Boat, Zach Pro, Triple Double, Fredbear's Diner, Julian the Mischievous, Duck, Maidzio2, Octopon, Stuffy Ant, RichDude29, Jehojim, Linhard Von Hevering, Magnuson Larslot, Trifector, Tibby, Mario Master 101, Hippopotamus, Levi Strux, Nuclear, Cassie Channel, Blessed Tiger, Wyatt Derpy, Yanni the Duck, Trader Mo, Mevins 2001, Display Changer, SMA, B Major 2003, Sir Musty, Belandor, Cinder CC, Jade Avery, Pronto Clone, Thicky Reiki, Ungenio TM, CW McCain, Tesseract, JubeTube, Jameson Pageson, Z-Frost, Conconut, Keep, and Christian Flattery Sequel Edition. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.